Well, all right, Jack. We are starting another podcast. Of course, the theme of the podcast is fake teacher. I've decided it's fake teacher because one purpose I think I have every time I'm having a conversation with you or anybody else in this kind of a context is I sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome. Do you know what that is?
Vaguely.
So, well, what do you think it means then, vaguely?
Like you don't feel like you know enough to be a teacher, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty vague. I mean, it's not exclusive to teachers, obviously,
Well,
right?
I
Like,
just like
yeah,
mean for
yeah,
you
for
personally.
me, yeah, dig it. So it's like any sense that when you're in a room, that you're not qualified to be in the room, or the job that you have, you feel like you're just not quite qualified to be doing, right? I would say the opposite of it is the Dunning-Kruger effect, where
That's like where you think you're smart but you're not.
you think you're knowledgeable, but you're not. I think smart is another type of like when you think you're smart, but you're actually dumbass. Like that's more like um, I bet there's a term for that. I feel like there's a term for that. But I mean, that's the whole point of the podcast, really, is because anytime that I ever felt like I didn't understand a thing or know a thing well enough, I at least had the good sense enough to go look it up and try to know more about it and try to be more prepared the next time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, something I feel like I am good at is at least asking the right questions and trying to find, like, answers to questions when I have them. And it's like usually around students, high school students. Um, I don't feel nearly as self conscious for obvious reasons. I mean, there's even some really smart kids out there that are obviously probably more knowledgeable than me on certain things, and it does make you feel more confident in other walks of life. When you can
Uh-huh.
kind of pull things off with kids or whatnot. In a
Yeah, yeah.
classroom environment. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
But so it's really helped it a lot. But there were a lot of times in my youth where I was just like, yeah, I would get really great opportunities, and I just don't think I did super well in those opportunities. I didn't grab the bull by the horns quite the way I should have, and maybe squandered some opportunities. No regrets. You learn what you learn, and you go into it with what you know. But I always kind of, once I found out what imposter syndrome was, I kind of realized, oh, okay, that really is. It becomes problematic and gets labeled a syndrome, right? Like, otherwise, it's just a problem. But like a syndrome means like this is dramatically affecting your life, or it's in some way significantly creating challenges for you. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
So like your imposter syndrome is like also really kind of exclusive to people that really are essentially qualified, if that makes any sense. Like these are people that they went through rigorous uh, processes to get where they're at to be hired. It's a problem amongst you know everybody, but it's particularly pronounced in like uh, supposedly in people that are like, I guess, Ivy League and elite corporation hires and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess the point is that if I'm going to talk about stuff, it just seems like there's plenty of things to talk about and learn about. And if there's any like thing that I learned early on in teaching, Jackson, it's the I called it not getting Rothrocked, because it used to have, because Rothrock was a teacher. I won't say where. I probably shouldn't even say his name. Somebody's going to Google that. But at any rate, he this guy, he's a great guy. I loved him. He would tell stories. He'd remember who you were, like no matter where you'd see him, in different places. He's an older guy, went to college in the 60s. He uh, not a burnout, but he had a ponytail. He drove a Harley into work, things like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, real interesting image of this guy I'm painting, I guess. But he had spent time in Vietnam, and had been an anti-war protester, a history teacher and an English teacher, right? And the kids that had him, they knew famously that if you brought up some controversial political thing, right? Like it didn't have to be anything they even knew about. You know what I mean? Like they just like, hey, look up some controversial shit, right? And then they'd be like, hey, Mister, and he'd be like, what? And he'd be like, blah blah blah, and he'd be like, well, let me just tell you, and then he would just talk the whole class, right? He would just lecture them about this stuff, and they'd be like, well, and I'd be like, well, and they would tell me about this in class because they'd be like, Mister, we can't do that with you, and I'd be like, well, it's probably a reason, I guess, but like explain, and they were talking about it, and they said, and I was like, so you do this purposely so that you don't have to actually do any work. I mean, does that work? And they're like, yeah, like he just realizes that, he didn't teach us what he was supposed to. And he says, well, we'll have to do that, tomorrow. I'm like, he should stop letting you guys do that then, right? Like, I assume he just didn't want to do all the grading, So
Yeah.
he probably had a
He was
plan.
fine with it.
Yeah, I think he was fine with it. And sometimes, you will do that, I think, in any situation, like there's time to fill, you might as well talk it through. But no, he would get, off track, and so you don't want to have that happen as a teacher. But there's so many teachable moments with kids that don't know a whole lot, and that's why I always liked. I'm going to refer to it always in the past in this context, right? But that's why I always liked teaching where I would teach. Is that I chose to teach in places that were hard, because in places where it's hard, is where you find the most growth, and that's the most fun to see. And it's like, and then you just learn so much about yourself, But yeah, you can get talking about something and realize that you taught them more about life, just because you had a conversation about like how things work. I mean, it's one of the earliest ones I remember having was just why they have to take so many tests, right? And it just that conversation, the back and forth, and just like you and I do a lot, like I don't know, I'm gonna have to look that up. I love it when people say that. How do you not know that? How do you not know that? It's like, it's got to be something I could say, hey, how do you not know that, right? So, yeah, my belief is that we're going to talk a lot on our podcast and have an opportunity to, get off topic a little bit. But I don't have a problem with that. I just feel like that just takes you to another place where people learn things. So it's kind of I wouldn't call it like going to class or anything, but I sure hope it's educational. And that's why I like doing it with you, because you always teach me something every time we have conversations. So I figure hopefully at least, the tens of people that might listen to us will get some new information. Have you read that book yet?
No, I haven't.
You haven't read it?
Mm-mm.
For the benefit of the audience, Jack, pretend no one can see that book and tell me what you're looking at. And tell me where you found it.
It's just in the house here, in our office, Brave New World.
You have not read A Brave New World, right?
No, I haven't.
You read 1984, though, like when you were probably too young to understand a lot of it.
Right? It was a few years ago, yeah. It's like 2020, I think. So I would have been 12.
Me, yeah, your sister's age, right?
About.
Well, they always get paired because they're basically two different pictures of a dystopian future within a generation or two of, that generation. And so they get paired in school a lot, senior English, that sort of thing. Or they used to, back when they used to read books. I just had pretty deep conversation about article I read in the Atlantic some weeks ago about students at elite universities struggling to read through entire novels and struggling to get through the reading lists at their universities.
How many books do they have to read?
I mean, it varies. In the one course they were talking about on the radio show I listened to about it with the writer, they were referencing this course at Columbia University, and it's a literature survey course, right?
Hmm.
There's like 14 books in a semester. It's like a book a week.
That's crazy.
I agree. I took a literature class out at Texas Tech, and it was a cool class. I loved the books that we read, right? Like it was almost exclusively a Don DeLeo class. I thought that was kind of a ripoff a little bit because I was like, come on, we're only going to read one, like, and it was an American novelist, course or whatever, right? And Don DeLeo writes great books. I really liked the first one. It was White Noise. He wrote this one called End Zone, and it's about like West Texas college football team. He's considered to be a accessible literary craftsman, right? I guess what they said in college. But
Yeah, how many books do you have to read
I had to read, I believe it was 8 books
that semester?
that semester, yeah, all by one dude. And what I thought was terrible is I never really got into at least 4 or 5 of them that I probably would have, and I ended up just kind of, Cliff's Notesing it through, and I managed to be writing a pretty good paper. But it's like, and the guy got mad at me. I remember going in for some tutoring, and he was like, if you don't want to study literature, you don't study literature. And I was like, I didn't exactly want to study literature. I just kind of wanted to maybe be an English teacher and a football coach or something.
Yeah.
So I wasn't exactly thinking about studying deep literature at Texas Tech University in the English department there. And I wasn't even majoring in English. I was majoring in mass communication studies. And so it was like, yeah, I'm not really majoring in literature. I just need another English credit for this graduate track. But anyway, I liked the class. I liked the guy. I mean, it was just, he just got frustrated that one time. But yeah, I didn't really get to read the books fully or completely. And so they did. They talked about this. They talked about how for years and generations, people have been buying Cliff's Notes. You know what I mean? Like the fast and easy version of a book for you to pass a test or a quiz by and, write a good, quality paper with. They were almost considered like you weren't allowed to have them in high school. I remember it was like, oh my God, so-and-so got the Cliff's Notes, like you could just buy them at the mall. So I didn't think it was necessarily like a illicit item, but people would treat them that way. So Cliff's Notes are just like like I said, like the quick down and easy
Yeah,
version.
I know.
Oh, you've seen them.
Yeah.
People skim and scan the books all the time. Is my point. Right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's like are the professors right now overreacting to kids not being able to read a book? Some of them might be, but then they looked at it and they said, well, wait a minute, the kids that are coming from private school seem to have more reading stamina than do our kids that are coming from public school. What could be the differentiator there? And the differentiator essentially boiled down to English classes that were focused on just taking tests and passing tests. And so they were eliminating full-length novels from their quote-unquote curriculums.
Yeah, so can I talk about this?
Sure.
Yeah, so this book is like literally all paper. There's no cover here, no hardcover, no like the smooth kind of plasticky cover. It's literally just paper all the way around. No, you can't have it. And it's like ripped on the front page, and on the back page there's a hole in it so you can see the words through it. It looks like it's from like 200 years ago.
From 200 years ago? I don't think the book's 200 years old.
I know,
man.
I'm just saying it looks like it. And then like the title here, it's literally just typed out like regular looking font.
Yeah.
There's nothing else. And then if you go a couple pages in, there's a quote, and it's literally all in French, no translation.
Oh, my frère.
L'utopie précisément combien plus it like who it says Nicholas Berdyaev.
I don't know, man. I should probably snap a picture of it and let the AI translate it for us at some point in time. But
I could just put it into Google Translate, but yeah, look.
yeah, some pretty yellow pages too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I believe I've had that copy of Brave New World since sometime in early college.
says this was published in 1969. Copyrights from 1932, but it was published in 1969. So it's probably about as
Yeah, I
it's
found
older
that.
than you.
Yeah, I found it somewhere. I want to say maybe it was like even in some stuff from like my, from my mom, when she passed. Like there was boxes of stuff that got mailed to me when I was in college in my dorm room. I think it might have been in that,
And then you have like the font here. It makes it look like you're reading the Bible.
but why the Bible?
Look at it.
It is packed, man. They did stick a lot of words on a page, but I think it's because it's the school copy version or something like. It's the paperback, right? Like so.
Yeah.
A Brave New World, huh? Yeah, I read it a lot, and I'm not sure. I wouldn't say I was obsessed with it, but it's like I had read 1984, and I didn't think it was very good. It was in high school, and I never really revisited it. I think I should again. I think we have a copy of it right over there. But yeah, I found the narrative in A Brave New World more interesting. Like the storyline was cool to me, and I don't know why I put all those paper clips in there. Probably help if I highlighted some of the text, but I know I thought those pages were interesting at some point in time.
Let's see here. Or the caste system, constantly proposed, constantly rejected. There is something called democracy, as though men were more than physiochemically equal. The 9 Years' War began in AF 141. Not sure when that's supposed to be.
It says earlier like what AF means. It's
Yeah. There's some girl called Lenina. Wonder where that name comes from.
she's pretty cool. No, wait, Lenina I think is the vapid one, but I don't know. It's been a minute.
Liberalism, of course, was dead of anthrax. But all the same, you can do things by force. Wonder what that means.
I think you need a lot of context. Like I said, I went through and I paper clipped a lot of. I might have just thought it sounded cool, like that. If you go back and you read that line, man, that's just some wicked shit to say to somebody. So I might have been looking to make lyrics for a song or something,
Oh, there's a song here in the second paperclip. I'm not gonna say it though, because this is really weird.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably Grexual, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's because A Brave New World is all about like how, like they don't perceive of sex to even be associated with motherhood or fatherhood. Like all of the babies in their society are born in literal test tubes. It's kind of where they get the idea of test tube babies, right? And then these hatcheries, right? And they get hatched, and then they get kind of raised by certain types of people in this caste system, and then they like the idea of a mother is gross to them, like it kind of like grosses them out. It gets so it's just this, and they're all controlled by this. I wouldn't say controlled, but their emotions are muted by this. Their sense of attachment, their sense of love and belonging, are muted by this drug called soma, which ironically, I think there's a drug now called Soma, but I think it does much the same thing. Some people have tried to say, like, pot smokers exhibit the same characteristics as the Soma addicts, which is the entirety of the population. It's all under the control of a central state or unifying power that controls the birth placement of people in their lives. Everything is 100% controlled, even their DNA. And so breaking out of that, obviously, would create problems. Most people don't want to, though, because they're addicted to the soma, and they sing songs to the soma, and they love it. And so it gets pretty weird. The narrative involves a native, and I think probably in today's environment that people are uncomfortable with some of the language they used to describe, the savages that
It
live
calls
outside
him
that
the
system.
savage.
Yeah,
Capitalized.
the savage. Yeah, he lives outside of this system.
On the last page here,
Yeah.
176. Just kill it, kill it, kill it. The savage went on shouting. It's one of the lines.
Yeah. Again, it's been too long since I've read it, but
There's another song here that isn't about orgies.
okay.
Yesterday's committee sticks but a broken drum. Midnight in the city, flutes in a vacuum. Shut lips, sleeping faces. Every stopped machine, the dumb and littered places where crowds have been. All silences rejoice, weep loudly or low. Speak, but with the voice of whom I do not know. Absence, say, of seasons, absence of egrias, arms in respective bosoms, lips and posteriors slowly form a presence. Whose, and I ask of what, so absurd in essence, that something which is not, nevertheless should populate, empty night more solidly than that with which we copulate. Why should it seem so squattily? Okay, I feel like that was still about sex, but
It probably was. You
yeah.
should probably not. Yeah, I mean, it's got lots of weirdness. And again, it's just pretty out of context. I mean, it's it's again though, if you think about it though, like if you completely separated human sexuality and sexual contact from procreation, what would that human sexuality look like? And that's obviously a very uncomfortable conversation to have
Wait, hold
with your
on.
son.
This was like a regular paperback, but
Yeah, it had like a covering.
it's almost all been ripped off except for this one little strip here, and it just says "Brave New."
Yeah, right. Like that's. I realize that is a pretty old book, man. The, try to pull up a couple of these memes that
This is like an antique. Like I feel like we could sell this
I'm
for
pretty
like a
sure it's
hundred
an antique.
dollars.
There's no way you could sell it for $100 because it's beat to hell. You know, all those paper clips alone. You know,
It's historical now.
that's hysterical, is what it is.
You just throw it on the table.
Give me $100, bookseller. So I feel like I'm talking around like the elephant in the room, right? Because we did say that we were gonna get on the air, so to speak, and talk about and air out like just some feelings and attitudes about the the recent election, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's
And
get on that.
yeah,
Yeah,
you think so, huh? I think it's time.
yeah. I mean, we're like 30 minutes into this.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I just I think that it's a hard thing to discuss because I still haven't fully thought about like how I feel about it. Like, I think I was a little more prepared for it happening than yourself, your mother, your sister, right? Like I was a little more prepared for uh, him to win. Only because, the polls just kept saying it was like 50-50 and they had no idea. And I'm like, man, if there's that many people undecided at this point in time and you just can't find like, a clear voice out there that's in support of her, like, it just didn't sound like it was going to be a runaway. And if it wasn't a runaway, it was going to be a courtroom nightmare for 6 months,
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
think the reason that so many people voted for Trump is they just wanted they just want everything to go back to 2019. Trump was president in 2019, so like you vote for Trump and he'll make it like 2019 again. Like there wasn't much logic, you know.
no, I,
Just make all of the problems go away.
I thought it was interesting the text that you sent us today, which in another text you sent, I think it was like the most Googled terms or Google trends from,
Yeah,
like, what were they the day of the election?
I don't remember, but the rising queries over the past few days. Can I change my vote? Up 700%. Will tariffs cause inflation? Up 250%. Things to buy before tariffs, 250%. Wall Street Journal tariffs, 250%.
I think that's one of those things I wish was funny. I mean, it is funny, but it's tragic. Like just things people should have been looking for before they went and voted or before they chose not to vote, right? Like,
I saw this thing on Twitter. Well, I saw it a while ago, but I saved it. The median voter wants low taxes but high spending, low inflation but monthly $2,000 checks, high tariffs but also free trade, repeal Obamacare but keep the Affordable Care Act.
yeah, that's my favorite one is just how ignorant people are of the that one's interesting to me, right? Where they're like, yeah, get rid of the HCA, and then you say, so you want to get rid of protections for pre-existing conditions, and they respond and they say, well, no. I mean, why would I want to get rid of that? And it's like, well, it's kind of like what you just said, right? Like witchcraft, right? I guess I don't know. I don't understand how like to have a conversation with people. I I'll say for sure I don't have very many people around me, Jackson, anymore that I try to have those conversations with. Frankly, like it's not really worth it. It just it destroys those relationships, and it just makes you feel bad because it doesn't make them feel bad. Like they're entrenched in this ignorance and this following of whatever it is they think. It's it's disheartening sometimes because you're like, hey, I could look some stuff up, and then they're like, you trust the mainstream media, and it's like, well, I mean, like The Economist is not really. Yeah, they're mainstream, but I mean that kind of means that they're also like probably reliable.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you saw, but Trump said that he's gonna end the Department of Education.
He tried to do that the first time around.
Yeah.
I don't recall him being successful. Although he did appoint probably the nuttiest, most anti-education type person that he could have. Well, I should say, excuse me, anti-public education person that I could imagine.
Also, he says that he gave like a 10-point plan, but among his promises says is to teach patriotism, bring back school prayer, and fire teachers who disagree.
Looks like I better get my LinkedIn page jacked up, huh? Start inventing some skills, man. Oh my goodness.
It's
All right.
alright. You can just like find some pasty liberal private school in California or something.
Yeah, I'm sure there's enough liberal schools for me to find a place to teach whatever it is I used to teach. But that's the other part of it is that I'm still a fake teacher in that regard too, and that right now I don't really do what I would consider any sort of like real teaching like that. That's what I used to do before the pandemic, in particular. Maybe a year after, I would do some real teaching, but it's just gotten to the point now where in public education it's not really the real thing, and so it's not just my imposter syndrome that makes me feel like a fake teacher. It's like I know I'm not really being a real teacher. Like none of this is real teaching. So I think it's more fun to have these kinds of conversations than that kind of conversation. I just know that if he's saying he's going to get rid of the Department of Education, then by what authority is he going to fire these teachers? That don't make no sense.
Yeah.
Does anybody ever ask him these follow-up questions? Like when you read these things, do you see a reporter saying, well, how are you going to fire the teachers that disagree with you if you get rid of the federal authority over those teachers?
I don't think he thinks these things through, yeah, and they don't ask.
It's just bravado is politics, and it's unsettling.
Well, sorry. It's just like it's a bit different from what we were talking about
What were we talking about?
Trump.
Oh,
But
well, he was talking about shutting down the Department of Education.
yeah, it's a bit different from all that though. Says following this illiterate guy on Instagram who decided to skateboard across America a couple weeks ago. Left his house in LA with one change of clothes and no money, expecting it to take like 2 weeks. He was so surprised when he found out the Rocky Mountains exist.
So a real person did this?
Yeah,
Well,
he's carrying on the pioneer spirit.
pioneer spirit with a T-shirt and some knee guards. I mean, I don't know, man. Like that's
You'd be surprised how many of them did that.
yeah. Just kind of figured out a way to get there.
Yeah. At least
Yeah,
this guy's
it takes
doing
me-
it all on Instagram, so we'll know if anything happens to him.
Well, if he's doing it on Instagram, right, he's probably trying to earn a buck doing it. So he's not like a bum. He's somebody with he's got a game he's working. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a little different than some dude just like, I'm gonna skateboard over here, man. Now, is it sincerely possible? Like, because I've met. I feel like that I have met people that are as ignorant and or intellectually disabled enough to where, I mean, they're just really not there, right? Like, met lots of people like that,
Yeah.
but I don't feel like I've ever talked to anybody in real life that doesn't think that the Rocky Mountains exist.
Well, never said that he didn't think they existed. Just that he wasn't aware of their existence. He just never bothered to think about it. Like, wait a minute. There's mountains here.
Mountains. He's discovered that there's mountains. So he never. Well, he's from California. He had to see some mountains, right? Like, so it's like the new set of mountains surprised him.
We do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
Been there. It's where a lot of imposter syndrome comes from, I'm sure too, right? Like,
Hold on, I'm texting that to you.
nah, I don't need it right now.
I just texted it to you.
Well, thank you. Well, yeah, come to think of it, this was on The Onion. It says, yeah, come to think of it, I don't think I've ever heard him tell one story about that time in his life. It says, no one really knows what Dad was doing from 1985 to 1995 or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't realize other people had dad experiences like that where there was this like gap in there. I think it's a Gen X thing.
Yeah, probably.
What was that thing you showed me before? It was Gen X teacher dad, right? Like it was the difference between the different generations as teachers, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the Gen X dad had like a life before, you know, and I guess that was the joke, is like Gen X dudes always had some kind of life before they did this thing or whatever. Before I was this, I was. And it's like, how many jobs have you had, dude? A lot. So I don't understand how Donald Trump can justify the people that he's putting in place based on what everybody said throughout the campaign that were supporting him, that seemed like sane, rational, intelligent people, and that you tend to want to respect because they're not otherwise unrespectable people, right? You're like, okay, so you're saying that he talks a lot of crap, but he's not really going to do a lot of things, right?
So annoying.
Well, I mean, the argument right now is, I mean, it looks pretty clear. He's got the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the courts, and he spent the past 4 years, you know, stoking campaigns, you know what I mean? In his whole 4 years that he was in office, he totally redid the court system. So he's got so much loyalty built into this thing.
I don't know. I mean, First of all, most of his cabinet appointments seem to be from the House, so that's going to hurt his majority. There's still a good amount of moderate Republicans
Those
there.
governors get to a point, they have to wait for a special election.
Yeah, that means they can't pass much in the meantime, the Republicans. It's actually really bad for them if they happen to lose their majority because of Trump's antics.
Yeah, but they would still have governors that appointed of the same party.
Eh, it there'd be special elections, it'd be a whole mess.
Well, I
Also,
agree. I thought the same thing when they took Hillary out of the Senate, for example, but that was a reliably, Democratic seat. There's been a couple people I've seen, where they took him out, and I thought, yeah, you don't want to take somebody out of that Senate seat, but
and then there's the Senate itself, and they seem like they're not too happy with Trump.
what makes you say that?
Well, the speaker they just elected, I can't remember his name.
Tune.
Dune, yeah, something like that.
I don't think it's pronounced Tune. It's Thune or
Dune. Yeah, he's
like spoon with a lisp.
if not anti-Trump, he's pretty against Trump's more radical stances.
I wonder how we know that.
Well, his history, things he said, how he's voted,
Is he against recess appointments?
I don't know.
Because that's the big deal. That's what Trump was saying. He was like asking all of his Trumpelstiltkins to verify whether or not the new majority leader would support his goal of having recess appointments. And recess appointments are basically backdoor appointments without congressional approval because you don't get a Senate vote on whether or not that person's qualified for the job, and so it implies, if that's what you want, that you're trying to get around the Senate's advice and consent, right? Which is their job.
The Trump people are pretty mad about this, and like I said, he's known as being kind of anti-Trump in general. So
it's got to be related then. That's the reason. It's because they want the recess appointments, and he's probably not on board with that. Probably because, again, it's deliberately in the face of the concept of advice and consent, which is required by the Constitution. And Trump don't have any sense that that's important, but I think that those senators, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter.
They like their power.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even the Republican senators, they might be kind of loyal to Trump's ideas. Not like all of them, but most of them. But at the end of the day, they mainly want their power.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's in it for their own deal, man. Like, it's
Like, I don't think most of the senators are like the kinds of Republicans you have in like the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really done much of a litmus test. Honestly, that part of it surprised me too, that we lost the Senate so badly. I just
didn't surprise me.
It surprises me in that I thought women were going to be more powerful in their vote, and that would affect these senatorial elections, because I thought that women wanted Democrats to go in there and provide them with basic bodily autonomy.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the demographic shifted too much. Women voted like 48-52 for the Democrats, like 52% to the Democrats, 48 to the Republicans.
I just honestly thought that was going to be a bigger swing.
I think that the issue is like, younger women are very Democratic, but then you have like older women, like suburban women, that sort of thing, and a lot of them actually shifted towards Trump.
Well, and a lot of that is just religious based. I mean, he has become a true religious figure, and that's really freaky, kind of weird. Yeah. Like, I don't know why these people think that the United States government is supposed to, I wouldn't say care about, but be in any way influenced by their faith. You know, the idea that Mike Huckabee is going to be it's I don't know that it's meaningless, but it's not certainly not in any sort of like way a policy position. But Mike Huckabee, the former governor of Arkansas, he ran for president. He's Sarah Huckabee's dad. Um, that guy's going to be the ambassador to Israel. And I don't know what you think about the topic. They had a scholar. It didn't sound like his assertions about what is accepted attitudes about the Palestinian people and their right to a state seemed overstated to me, and what I have read, out there about it. But Mike Huckabee is famous for saying, and even saying, "Hey, I have to be careful how I say this." But he's essentially a minister turned politician, and he believes that there is no such thing as a Palestinian people. He doesn't think there's a Palestine, right?
Excellent gambit by the Arab voters in Dearborn and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. They really punished the Democrats by basically this is the definition of to spite one's face, right? Like that saying originally comes from. I want to say a Greek island and it's Greek myth, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Anyway, so it might have even been the Isle of Lesbos or whatnot. But that could also be something I'm conflating. But the term "to spite one's face" was an island of women who were invaded, and upon being invaded, so that they would be so horrible to look at and not be subject to rape.
Yeah, that's Lesbos.
Yeah, they cut their noses off, and so this was to disfigure themselves. So the term "to cut your nose to spite your face."
I don't think that is Lesbos then.
But the irony of it is that rapist doesn't care if it's what I mean. He's not looking for pretty girls. Like that's not what they do. And
Yeah.
so it's like you're doing this thing. I think ultimately, I don't care about rapists, but. I don't know what that has anything to do with it, but the idea that somebody would do a thing to spite somebody else, to teach somebody else a lesson that ends up being worse on them, is that whole ricochet effect, right? Like, hey, I'm going to fire a warning shot at you, and hits a wall and bounces back and hits you in the shoulder, not only did you seriously injure yourself, you're also looking really stupid in the emergency room, right?
Yeah. But yeah, the Israeli ambassador that Netanyahu just appointed, their new ambassador to the United States, is basically their version of Mike Huckabee. He's a West Bank settler who thinks that Israel should annex the West Bank, and he also has ties with Kahanists.
Ooh, tell me more. What's a Gahanist?
So there's this guy, I think he was a rabbi, Meir Kahane, and he believed that Jews basically had a right to the entire Holy Land, and that they should expel or kill all of the Arabs that don't submit, or just for demographic reasons. If there were too many Arabs, they could, expel them. So yeah, that's like the ideology that Ben-Gvir follows. He actually has a portrait of Kahane in his house.
So Ben-Gvir is who again? Over there,
he's in the Israeli coalition.
Well, but he's risen like through the ranks just since October 7th, right?
No, not really. He's in the same spot, Minister of National Security, I think.
Oh, I thought he got that after somebody else quit.
No.
No.
But he has, he's gotten more influential lately.
I mean, can you call him a nut? I mean, is it?
Oh, yeah. He was denied service in the IDF. I was about to say he was denied service in the IDF because he was too crazy.
So, wait a minute. He was, I don't know if that's the appropriate term, but he was too crazy. to serve, but now he is Minister of Defense, right?
National security.
National Security. Same thing? Or?
No, it's like their version of Homeland Security. So he handles he's like the top police guy.
So wait. It was his fault, right? Like he was the guy in charge when.
No, no, because that would fall under the defense ministry. October 7th,
Why?
because it's a military issue. The IDF was supposed to protect Israel's borders.
Okay. Still on BB though.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, the thing with October 7th is that there were so many IDF forces moved into the West Bank to protect the settlers as they were riding against Arabs that they didn't have enough soldiers to protect against the Hamas attack.
You know, I think that the settlements part of it is really the problem. The fact
Yeah.
that they're not addressing that as what it is. In other words, this idea that somebody like Mike Huckabee has attained this position is that, well, it's what are you reading too much into that for? You know, you're just being whatever. You know, there's just like animosity against, you know, saying, hey, you know, these are dumbass decisions, you know, from the point of view of you're just being partisan. But it's like, I'm not being partisan. I'm saying this is a guy who doesn't believe in a two-state solution. And if you don't believe in a two-state solution, and quite frankly, I think you are talking about genocide, because there's nobody in the Middle East that's going to take the Palestinians in. And if you're going to wipe them out of their homeland, where the hell are they going to live? Like, you got to figure this out. And if you're not willing to share the land with them in a two-state solution situation, I don't think you can maintain the moral high ground. And I get it. I get what people are saying, that there was a two-state solution proposed, and instead of and one side have agreed to it, and the other side declared war and said, we're going to wipe you out of existence from the river to the sea, right? Like, and then that seems to be the continuing battle cry, which makes you empathize with the Jewish people a little bit more so than the Palestinian people. But having lived through this for the past 50 years, you just have to say, and having met Palestinians, right? Like, and had them, you know, like in your classrooms and on your teams and stuff, right? Like, you just have to look at that and say, hey, man, these people have a right to exist.
Yeah.
And even if they're represented by and manipulated by and in some ways, I think enslaved by terrorists, you were saying, it just, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it before, you know, like that the Palestinians rejected the two-state solution.
Yeah.
And it's more complicated because at the negotiations, the Israelis were calling for annexations in parts of the West Bank, and the Palestinians renegotiated, but the Israelis were still demanding like more land than the Palestinians were willing to give. So that's why Arafat left the conference,
Hmm.
and that's what resulted in the Second Intifada. But in 2000,
So they act like
uh,
we had a deal on the table, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
it wasn't exactly that.
at the end of 2000, after the election, Clinton decided to create the so-called Clinton parameters, basically like his suggestions for how future negotiations should be done between Israel and Palestine. So he called for land swaps between Israel and Palestine
Mhm.
as part of the deal. So Arafat sent a letter on the 27th of December to Clinton. It says, Mr. President, please allow me to address you with all the sincerity emanating from the close friendship that ties us and the historical importance of what you are trying to do. I want to assure you of my will to continue to work with you to reach a peace agreement. I need your help in clarifying and explaining the basis of your initiative. I need clear answers to many questions relating to calculation of land ratios that will be annexed and swapped, and the actual location of these territories, as well as the basis for defining the Wailing Wall, its borders and extensions, and the effect of that on the concept of full Palestinian sovereignty over Haram al-Sharif. That's the Temple Mount. We understand that the idea of leasing additional territory is an option we have the right to reject, and is not a parameter of your bridging proposals. We also presume that the emergency Israeli locations are also subject to negotiations and to our approval. I hope that you have the same understanding. I have many questions relating to the return of refugees to their homes and villages. I have a negative experience with the return of displaced Palestinians to the West Bank and Gaza during the interim period, because the modalities remain tied to an Israeli veto. Not one refugee was allowed to return through the mechanism of the interim agreement, which required a quadripartite committee of Egypt, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine to decide on their return. Equally, I don't see a clear approach dealing with compensation of the refugees for their land, property, and funds taken by Israel under the aegis of the Israeli custodian of absentee property. I feel, Mr. President, that the period for Israeli withdrawal specified in your initiative is too long. It will allow the enemies of peace to exploit the time to undo the agreement. I wonder if the period is one of the fixed parameters of your proposal, a basis that cannot be changed. Mr. President, I have many questions. I need maps, details, and clarifications that can help me take the necessary decisions with my leadership and people. I would like you to appreciate that I do not want to procrastinate or waste time. We need a real opportunity to invest once more your determination and creativity to reach a fair and lasting peace with your efforts and during your presidency. I remain, Mr. President, ready to pay you a visit at the White House in the shortest possible time if you find this visit appropriate, to discuss with you the bridging proposals and to exchange views on ways to develop them farther. Please accept my highest regards and best wishes, Yasser Arafat.
Hmm. So he seems perfectly willing to negotiate in that letter and is all fired up about the idea of, a two-state solution. It does sound to me like the biggest challenge has been that when we say refugees repatriated to their villages, some of that sounds like people from way back in the 40s being allowed to move back into their neighborhoods, which, I mean,
Yeah,
I guess it's just not that many people ago, so it seems reasonable to me that they should not necessarily give it back. I don't know. There ought to be a way that you could live in either place and just be a citizen of one or be a citizen of both, essentially, right? Like, I'm a Texan and I'm also an American.
so Palestine should be a part of Israel, or Israel should be a part of Palestine?
Neither, just that a person is allowed to be a citizen and a voting member of both countries or both states.
That would be kind of unprecedented
I know. It'd be kind of
because
cool, though.
normally the only way to do that is to have one country be subjected to another.
Yeah, that's bullshit. Like, why should one person be subject? And I'm not even saying that, like, one country can be independent of the other. I'm not saying that the countries aren't independent of each other. I'm simply saying that if you live in a municipality because your traditional homeland that your parents' parents bought back in 1937, man, and they got a deed to that property. You know what I mean? And they said it's a real estate war. Is really what it is. It's made bullshit because it's got God and Allah fighting for land space up in the clouds apparently, but it's nonsense. Honestly, it's just a legal land
That's only
dispute.
one aspect of it, though.
It's a legal land dispute corrupted by the religiosity of it, right?
No,
Because
because
those
the
people should
is
be allowed to go back to their properties or at least get fair market value for them, right?
well, yeah, sure, but hold on, because the war wasn't like over property, right? Like the reason that the war started in 1948, the Jews had bought all of that land legally. I mean, the Arabs were upset because a lot of times like Jews would buy land from Arab landowners and then kick out the Arabs who were renting the properties.
Hold on. Repeat that again. Like, just like kind of go back because it seems like maybe I wasn't listening close enough.
Yeah, so sometimes Jewish like businessmen, they would buy some amount of land from an Arab landowner, and then he would kick out like the what do you call it, like the people who were living in like renting out some property there,
Yeah.
and then they would give that land to Jews to rent out. But I mean, it was still all done like through legal means. The reason that the war broke out was just because they didn't want to accept a state that was run by Jews on what they considered Arab land.
Yeah, and so again,
So that
that's
was
the
before
religiosity
any
aspect of
that
it,
was
though.
before any real land dispute like happened though. Is they disputed the rights of the Jews to own land there on the basis that they were Jews
Yeah.
or foreigners or whatever.
I get you. I hear what you're saying, but that's what I'm. But it's like I don't know if you're hearing what I'm saying or if it's like what I'm saying is I'm not articulating it right.
I
Which
don't
is
think
to
what you're
say
I
that
think what you're saying is too simplistic though.
no, well, let me just restate because I just heard what you said, and what I keep hearing is my imaginary friend in the sky is more powerful than your imaginary friend in the sky. So my imaginary friend in the sky said that you're not allowed to own that land over there. You're not allowed to have any sovereignty over it. So you got to go kill those people. That's separate from, hey, my grandparents have the deed to this property and owned it, right? Like,
Well, I mean, well, I didn't realize you were atheist first of all.
I'm not necessarily atheist. I'm just saying that from a point of view of how governments and states function in their negotiations between and amongst one another should be absolutely, completely removed from the
But
religiosity of it when
second,
it comes down to the argument of my guy
yeah,
said it was supposed to be that way. Like your guy don't trump my guy.
second that
Trump intended or pun intended.
it's not two gods, it's two interpretations of one god.
Same diff to an atheist.
But third, this is the most important thing. It wasn't entirely about religion, it was also about nationalism. The reason that the Jews wanted to go to Palestine wasn't because of any religious reasons, up until the Holocaust, really. Even then, it was still mostly motivated by secular forces, though. Almost all of the original people who migrated there were secular or even atheist Jews. It was based on the idea of nationalism that they had imported from Europe, like the idea that all nations or ethnicities deserve a state for their own people. And so the Arabs also had developed that, right? So it had a lot to do with that.
I understand what it had to do with, but what it has to do with now has to be about the civil legality of who owns and who does not own a piece of property. And
Well,
any
you
in
can't decide
any
what the conflict's about, though.
doesn't matter what the conflict's about. All that matters is who gets to live where. And if you can't live next to somebody because they have a different religion than you and you feel like you got to blow them up and kill them, well, fuck off, man. Like that's not that's not being a part of a civilized global community. And if you don't want to be a part of that, well, fuck yourself off. Go live in a commune in the depths of the jungle. But I mean, probably the natives there are going to have a problem with you too. You know what I mean? Because they don't want to cover up their women because they like running around in nothing, right? Like I don't know. I'm probably stereotyping the natives, but I don't know, man. I'm not an atheist, but I'm also not somebody who believes in any way whatsoever. God dang. We started talking about this with Trump, right? And just today, I was listening to these people.
You, I
Hold
don't
on,
want.
and they were talking about how they're making their decisions based on this guy supporting their religious attitudes and beliefs, and I find myself just exclaiming out loud, like, how are you making your political decisions based on that? Like, even if he was a religious person, you're not supposed to be making your decisions based on your religion.
Yeah, but it's not always. It's not all about that, though.
I don't
Like
understand.
you're simplifying it to what you want it to be about. It feels like you're not seeing the conflict for what it is. You're seeing it for like what you feel like it is. It's I just don't get it.
So what is the conflict then? What am I
I've
not
been
seeing?
explaining it.
All right, well, re-explain it. I'm a fake teacher. I don't know stuff, man. I'm just like trying to get by and grade the papers here.
Well, what do you need me to like re-say? I can't say all
Right.
of that again.
I guess where I'm missing is I don't understand where in the negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis, where we can't come to some kind of an agreement that allows people free access to these religious sites, allows people, if they live in a part of one state or the other, you live in downtown Gaza City or you live in um, Tel Aviv, regardless of what kind of funny hat you wear, you should get
That's
to.
rude.
I'm sure they think baseball caps are funny, man. You ought to see this really hilarious cap that a lot
Yeah.
of people wear around. Like you don't get around. They wear these fuzzy. They look like a Russian fuzzy cap. Like it just like covers their whole head. It's just round and it's like kind of cylindrical looking, but it's like looks like it's made of fur, but it's not. It's really strange. I don't know how to explain it. But anyway, I digress. My point is that
Wait, in America or in Palestine?
no, like here, like right, like around town and stuff, like just people
Okay, I couldn't
walking
tell
around with
what you
these
meant.
fuzzy looking hats. Yeah, I'm just saying people wear funny hats, man. But I meant that
Okay,
from the point of
but
view of the yarmulke and the other thing.
the reason that they can is because they fucking hate each other. Like it's not about it's not really all about like all this complicated stuff with religion or nationalism and property disputes. Like at the end of the day, they just hate each other because they've been fighting each other for 80 years.
There's a story that we used to learn about. I don't know if kids learn about in history nowadays, but it's the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? Like I think they were in Kentucky. It's two warring families, right?
Yeah, it's that.
I understand that, but that in American context, I can't say 100% because obviously we got our own issues here. Like I don't want to absolve us from weirdness, but supposedly, that's supposed to be allegorical, which is to say that we're supposed to learn the lesson from the story of the Hatfields and McCoys to understand that we live in a civilized nation of laws with civil courts and civil justices.
It's
And
a nation, though. They don't have a nation there. They don't have one court that they can go to
that's all
for
I'm
these
saying. You fix
disputes.
that shit. Quit throwing bombs, quit blowing people up.
Just fix it, man.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. My point is that from a negotiation standpoint, I can't take Bob McCoy seriously in his war with Bob Hatfield because Bob McCoy won't stop shooting at Bob Hatfield.
Well, let
For,
me explain. Another reason that they won't allow right of return for the Palestinians is because the Israelis are worried that if they did that, there would be more Palestinians in Israel than there are Jews, and that would mean that the Jews would literally be outvoted in the Knesset, and that Israel would be annexed into Palestine. And the Palestinians are worried the same thing would happen if they allowed too many Jews to live in Palestine, because then the Jews would unite and they would just have Palestine get annexed into Israel.
so while that seems like a valid concern,
It is because they would do that. 100% they would.
what I'm suggesting is not a full right of return. I think that based on what you just said, that does seem completely nonsensical of us, right? Like that's not going to happen. What I am saying is that if your family has deed to a property in Tel Aviv and can prove through real estate records that they own that property and that they were forced out. It's kind of like I don't believe in reparations, right? Like for um, victims of slavery in this country. I just, I think that it's historically speaking, that sin was paid for in blood. And
Well, it's too long ago. Doesn't
Yeah,
make sense.
well, that's what I was gonna say, and I also think generationally speaking, it's too long ago. You end up with DNA tests to find out, like what percentage of, and before we did any of that, then I would say, hey, we got to do the same thing with Native Americans, right? And in many ways we have, especially with some of the things that were like where they have repatriated the lands, through court cases in Oklahoma, so the,
Yeah.
the Native Americans own it. But my point is to say that the you were going to say,
Uh, like, I mean, it would have made sense, in the 1860s. And they actually really tried,
oh yeah,
the radical Republicans, but the more
40
moderate
acres and a mule,
Republicans and all of that, like, they just weren't able to, like, they wouldn't allow it to pass.
yeah,
Like, what's his name? Andrew Johnson.
yeah.
He wouldn't allow the more radical measures to be put in place.
Hmm. Well, and it's like you can go back to those specific decisions and just say there's nobody alive now that's accountable and responsible for what Andrew Johnson did. But what I will say is that the Tulsa massacre and the total like degradation of those families and the murders of those people and pushing many of those families into generations of poverty when they were very wealthy people, like those families, like that's just like one people ago. You know what I mean? That's just one old guy ago. There's and so the idea that we don't repatriate those people's funds, I'm not saying you can have them move back down to Tulsa, you know what I mean, and take over their business on, whatever street that was. Um, but you can pay them and you can give them rightful restitution for their property and their property loss. And so that's all I'm saying is that a Palestinian should have the right to either move into that place and become a voting member and or be paid fair market value for the property, including the amount of money that they would have accrued generationally for owning that property, right? So if there's an office building in downtown Tel Aviv on top of grandma's, old house, and that property is worth $300 million, well, guess what, Israel? You got to pay, you got to pay Home Slice over here in Palestine $300 million. That's fine, but that's the deal. Or you got to let him become the landlord. You know what I mean? And
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
there's a few more problems with that, though.
Okay.
So either you have one really old lady, right, who was deported in 1948, or
Less
uh,
than likely.
yeah, or you have to go through and find who like the legal heir is, and then you have to go through like how many people deserve the rights, and then you have to see like if you do let them in, how many people can they bring along with them.
Well, that's what I said. There's only look. This is great, and at some point in time, I cannot wait to have a conversation like this and just like phone in and have a lawyer or a real estate lawyer give us their input. But that would be great to have right now. But I guess what I'm saying is, like I said earlier, it's only one old person ago. It's not like it's four old people ago, like the Civil War. This is just one old. This is your grandma or your grandpa ago. No, I'm sorry, your great grandma or your great grandpa ago, right? So it's uh, my dad's generation essentially. That's not that many people ago, and there's
Yeah,
records for that. Like we still got pictures and stuff of
yeah, I heard all that. That's what I was responding to.
yeah. So you're just saying that like you don't think those maybe because of all the war and the total obliteration of Gaza at this point in time, right? The paperwork's missing.
No, I'm saying if it isn't.
Yeah.
Did you not hear what I said? Like,
If it isn't, how many people? But I'm
yeah,
saying, but okay, so you got there's property in a lot of people's families, right? Not everybody in the family gets the ranch, and they
yeah.
don't always divide the ranch up.
But my point is, if you do give it to just one person, let's say, what's to stop them from bringing their whole family in? And then you repeat that for, however, let's say you have like 10,000 new people coming in, like owning this property, right? What's to stop them from bringing 10 of their family members, right? Now you have, what, 100,000 people coming in, and that changes the demographic situation a lot, you
You
know?
know what that sounds like? It sounds like Donald Trump's replacement theory. It's not really
Exactly.
his, but I
Yeah,
mean, he's
exactly.
championed it.
So, like,
That's why we all like salsa.
salsa? What?
Salsa.
Oh, salsa.
Yeah, it's good. That's why we get chips and salsa every time we go to Chili's, man. Sorry, Chili's does not support this program that I know
So, yeah, the problem though is that like that would make a lot of people mad. Also, you have to think it's a very small country, right?
of. Yeah.
They have, I want to say, like, I don't know, 5 million people. Well, it's like 5 million Jews and then like I think like 1,200,000 Arabs. So, like you change the demographics a lot just by even 100,000 people coming in.
Hmm.
And if you
Yeah.
multiply that again, say they bring 10 of their people along, yeah, 1 million people, and then suddenly, we've been replaced. Right, and so that's what they're worried about in the Jewish end, and then in the Palestinian end,
That's why they don't want settlements over there.
yeah,
Same thing. You can't come over here and start a settlement because you're going to, even if you submit to our legal system, you've still changed the voting demographic.
and it could almost be worse if they became Palestinian citizens, yeah, because then they'd be voting.
Fuck a man for wanting to be free.
Also, the problem is that the Israeli settlements tend to be built on agricultural land, and they're not always like residential areas. Sometimes they'll just claim large swaths of Palestinian farmland,
That's messed up,
and
bro.
they'll start using that, or they'll burn down Palestinian farms that don't belong to them, just as reprisals for like terrorist attacks that were unrelated to what that family was doing.
I mean,
So yeah, like
doesn't anybody see that as being problematic?
oh yeah,
Like, I mean,
so
Israeli
well,
people.
hold on. So like a Palestinian terrorist will come in and he'll like shoot up a settlement, and then maybe just like two injuries, and then a bunch of settlers will go and they'll like raid some random Palestinian farmland, and they'll like start throwing fire bombs and stuff, and they'll burn down like a whole farm, and the IDF will be there protecting them so that the Palestinians don't harm the settlers since they're Israeli citizens.
You have this on good authority.
Oh yeah, it's happened. There's been a whole lot of news articles about it I've seen, like Israeli media, international.
Yeah, I mean, I trust you. It's I wouldn't trust anybody who just happened to listen to us on the World Wide Web, like trusting that without you being able to say. And you don't have to quote your sources. I mean, that would be ridiculous. I'm a fake teacher. Why would I make you quote your sources? But no, we're not going to spread bullshit either. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure. But and I know you. I don't think you would. I just it's like I don't want people thinking we are.
Yeah.
And I'm throwing wild ass ideas out there. I mean, I'm not a politician necessarily. I'm not a. I'm definitely not a preacher. I honestly don't even know what I am. I don't have a whole lot of self identity. Um, I think that's what a lot of this comes down to, and so is identity. But I mean, I am. I'm throwing wild ass ideas out there because I know it gets you riled up a little bit. One, especially if I say something stupid, too. And it's like I have to ask questions that I might feel like I know the answers to, and then in other situations, it's like I have to really um, think about how to provocate. Um, it's an important part of being a teacher is being able to provocate people. Provocate people. Like I ask provocative questions, and I remember discussing this one time with somebody. Like there's a group of people, from a professional development point of view. Like you sit in a room full of teachers, educators, and well, I feel like that our job sometimes in the context we were talking about is classroom discussion, Socratic learning. And I said, you have to be a provocateur. And you have to be mindful, that they know that you're playing the role of provocateur. So they don't ascribe um, values to you based on positions that you take. You have to make sure they understand what a devil's advocate is and what you're trying to do. And you totally get it. You play the game. But in some ways, when I throw a wild ass idea out there like that, it's coming just from a place of sincerity too. Because in this particular conversation, like I don't think the Palestinians deserve the lot they've got. You know,
Yeah.
and it bothers me to see. At the same time, I won't let people call it uh, genocide. I think that's just an affront to the concept, and certainly an affront to the Jewish people and what they experienced in World War II.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're saying that you're going to wipe them out of existence by not letting them have a place or a land to call their own, and I mean, as in this perpetual state of war, I mean, you're resigning these people to a state of survivalhood, and when people are in a state of survivalhood, I mean, they're in that amygdala state, that fight or flight, raw, like you can never back it. What did this guy tell me? Coach Williams, man, way back in the day, great dude, big, tall, huge, former Major League Baseball player, dude. You know what I mean? Just big guy, and he would, yeah. I saw him one time really take on a couple of dudes, like that had been in a fight, and I was like, man, I could never do that. That scares me. Like what am I going to do if I'm the only guy in that situation? He goes, never back one of our kids into a corner. Because if you do, you're the one who did it, and it's going to end badly, and it's going to be your fault. Because none of that had anything to do with me. I was just trying to protect the kids in the hall and get that outdoors, right?
Yeah.
And and so it's like you just you got to recognize that when people are in that state of mind, man, they really are mindless. And I'm not saying that it absolves them of wrongdoing, but if you're the person who put them in that state of mind, it is on you. And so at some point in time, you got to back off. You got to let them out of the corner because if you keep somebody backed into a corner, I mean, it's like that old saying, right? Like, which is never throw the first punch, but if you get into a fight, you better fight like you're the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark and it's starting to rain. Right? Like your ass better get going, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like if you're gonna fight, you better fight, and you better fight to win. And that's the mentality of, like somebody's in that fight or flight syndrome. And you see it all the time in poverty
Hmm.
stricken neighborhoods, and kids that have not had parents and haven't had fathers, haven't had the benefit of reading. I don't know who Aristotle is, man. You know what I mean? They're like, Aristotle, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, they don't have a clue, right? People who come from an environment like that, they're not barbarians, they're not savages like in that book, you know what I mean? But, the simple fact of the matter is they haven't been taught. That kid, you know what I mean, or that person hasn't been taught, like the emotional control skills to manage those situations. And so I just feel like that the Israelis and the U.S. and the Western governments, et cetera, the I guess, Western governments, non-Islamic governments, like their attitude about it is, you know, why aren't y'all being more civilized? And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, man, it's kind of hard when you're in that situation.
Yeah.
They feel like the third monkey right now.
I think in general it's easy to accuse people who are like that disadvantaged and oppressed. It's easy to accuse them of terrorism, and like a lot of times they do commit terrorism, but like at the same time, I think to accuse all of them of terrorism or to accuse like that entire cause of as being
Terrorist in
terroristic,
nature.
yeah, like it's just kind of wrong, And like the Russians did the same thing with Chechnya. Like they invaded Chechnya and then they acted all surprised. When
Why are people shooting at
yeah,
us? Like, oops. Like, what? Yeah, I get it.
it's just interesting because there were Islamists in the Chechen leadership, like Shamil Basayev,
Mm-hmm.
but then there was also Jokhar Dudayev. He was the first president. He fought against Islamists and their influence. And then there was Aslan Maskhadov. He was Jokhar's successor, and he did sort of the same thing, right? Like, and he knew that he had to have an alliance with the Islamists if Chechnya was going to fight against Russia. So he had to like play both sides, sort of. He had to have an alliance with the Islamists while at the same time doing his best to not allow them influence in Chechnya.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, Shamil Basayev he launched an attack on the Russians at Dagestan, and so that gave the Russians the excuse they needed to attack Chechnya, even though Maskadov hadn't ordered that or been involved with any of that. And so, like the Islamists just messed everything up for the Chechens, like the entire war. But the Chechen leadership still had to be on friendly terms with them, to fight.
Mm.
And so that meant that the Russians could just, lump them all together and say that they were fighting against terrorists.
Sure. It's blanket. Hey, we're fighting against terrorists, so it justifies everything that we do, especially when you look at what the U.S. did when we invaded two countries and dropped $6 billion worth of bombs on them. Right?
Yeah. Well, Afghanistan was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To an extent. I mean, I won't get into making moral judgments about any of it. Ultimately, you know my position, which is that war itself is immoral, and that it is the most immoral thing that human beings do to one another.
There's a saying actually in Chechnya. War only ends with war.
I dig it. I kind of get where that. It's almost like the snake eating the snake's tail.
Hmm. Yeah, like
Remind me, I said that. I was going to say though that. Well, no, I'll go there. It's no, it's totally that's a non sequitur. But I have to battle those in my head. You know what I also thought about though when we were talking about this same thing. Because like again, the president elect wanted to shoot protesters in the legs. He wanted to use the military against protesters. And one of the things that people talk about is it's hard to argue, because I get where they're coming from emotionally, especially, and even to a degree intellectually, that the rioting, that turned into looting, that turned into the burning of buildings and the burning of businesses, um, regardless of how widespread or not widespread. I mean, it shut down like entire downtown areas, that needed the business and they just couldn't. Um, it's the point of a strike, like a labor strike, is cause disruption. So I mean, I get the idea that they cause disruption, but that they cause so much damage, and it's like so then people like President elect they get to label like blank, like they get to shit stain with a big brush of poop. You know what I mean? Everybody that's out there on the protest line because seven dudes decided to burn down a Toys R Us, and then you get
well, we also know that
we also know that
there were Republicans that were put in there to encourage people to loot and burn stuff,
and whether we call them Republicans or not, but
or
I think
idiots,
we would, huh?
paid idiots.
Well, yeah, agents. And they also specifically had agents that literally motivated people to destroy, burn, and loot, who were actively doing those crimes with these people and
Yeah,
motivating those things to happen to make it worse. And it, like, that whole aspect of this is for an entirely different discussion because we're almost up on our time. But I just, I think it's fascinating to think about how emotionally and politically those things are related. Like going over to the Middle East, and I think a lot of Americans, a lot of people in the electorate, they're like, "What does that have to do with me?" And obviously, with respect to Dearborn, probably has a lot to do with you, right? Like whatever you want in your life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. So closing thoughts on what your fake teacher has brought up in terms of that corollary. Is there a corollary? Am I making too close of a connection? Is it
I
it
think
feels related?
they're related. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say so. Like that you can have like a decent movement that gets corrupted by people like Hamas.
I think that's the real problem is you got those organizations like Hamas, and that's where again maybe I think we agree on this, but I mean it just seems to me that recognizing that you do have this religious component to it that really does kind of screw the whole situation up.
Yeah.
Like if you could take that, my imaginary guy is more powerful than your imaginary guy. Again, respecting the fact that the minority population in there is my imaginary guy, right? Like stuck in the middle.
Well, the Christians are they're mainly on the side of Palestine
Well, of course, they got to be on the side of. Oh, wait, what?
because they're Arabs. All of the Christians, for the most part, are Arabs, so they support Palestine.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah, and
the
then
well, hold
the
on.
others. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine,
Uh huh.
the main communist organization, has actually been led by a Christian.
It kind of stands to reason because of their whole um, evangelical belief in the second coming of Christ and all of that.
Well, that's like a
The
Protestant thing.
Armageddon thing, right? Like,
No, that's a Protestant thing.
well, I'm just
These
saying
are
that's why Huckabee's
Orthodox.
over there.
Yeah, like
This
those
is,
are two different types of Christians, is what I'm saying.
yeah, but Huckabee believes
Yeah.
that he has to maintain the Jewish state so that when Jesus comes, I don't know if he thinks he's supposed to get a ribbon or something when Jesus comes. I don't know how that works.
They
but
think that Israel's existence is like some sort of a requirement for the second coming.
I feel like they ought to just let God do his job.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they're trying too hard,
Yeah.
Let's end on that. Mike Huckabee is trying too hard, right? Like he's a try hard, right? And Jesus is gonna kind of laugh at him and say, "Thank you, teacher's pet. You're doing a great job.
I think
You get a
it.
B minus because you're a little
Yeah.
overbearing."
Well, maybe it is a bit oversimplistic
Yeah,
or like overgeneralizing.
yeah,
I think most of the Christian conservatives who support Israel,
yeah.
they just do it because they think Muslims are evil and they hate the terrorists and they think that Israel's our friend and they're fighting against the terrorists.
I'll be honest with you; those terrorists don't give us a whole lot to work with sometimes in terms of empathy.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, like I'm just saying, like that's the reason they support Israel at the end of the day is because they fight terrorism.
well, I think we've been terrorized by the dogs, so we're gonna sign off. This has been Tim and Jackson on the, I think, initial broadcast of Fake Teachers.
Yeah.
You have a nice one, son.
All right.